It's April 8th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with South Korea's second recon satellite launch. South Korea launched its second military reconnaissance satellite from John F. Kennedy Space Center in Florida this morning. This is a part of the country's plan to secure 5 such satellites by 2025 to upgrade its surveillance on North Korea. The government remains flexible over its plan to hike the medical school admissions quota, and the Korea Medical Association is holding a joint press briefing with trainee doctors and medical students after Wednesday's general elections. Israel has pulled its ground troops out of southern Gaza. While Israel notes the withdrawal is for tactical reasons, Egypt is hosting new rounds of talks on a potential ceasefire with Israel and Hamas. South Korea has launched its second military recon satellite. Now, following the launch, our military's reconnaissance capabilities are expected to be greatly improved. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung is on the line with us. Min-jung, tell us about the launch.
Tommy, the country's second military reconnaissance satellite lifted off at around 8:17 a.m. Korea time from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The second launch follows a successful launch last December, and as was the case then, the satellite was carried by a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Separation from the rocket is estimated to take place some 45 minutes after launch, and communication with the ground station should occur 9 minutes later.
Min-jung, we hear today's launch is different from the one launched last year. Now, how's that?
Right. The first satellite was an EO-IR satellite equipped with an electro-optical and infrared sensor. It can capture detailed images, but visibility depends on the weather and time of day. The second satellite, however, is a SAR satellite equipped with synthetic aperture radar sensors. The system captures clear images day or night, regardless of weather conditions. The EO-IR satellite checks in on the Korean Peninsula twice a day, but the SAR satellite does so about 4 to 6 times a day. This means the military can perform twice as many reconnaissance activities with the launch of the second satellite.
Now, the launches are all part of the military's 425 mission. What's the main goal of this mission?
The mission's goal is to have 5 satellites in orbit by 2025 to boost surveillance of the Korean Peninsula amid North Korea's growing nuclear and missile threats. The first satellite will be joined in orbit by 4 SARs, and when all 5 operate together, the military is expected to have coverage at about 2-hour intervals. Today's launch comes as North Korea ramps up its spying activities as well. The North launched its first spy satellite last November and aims to launch 3 more this year. This is all I have for now. Back to you, Dami.
All right, Min-jung, thank you for the update. Do keep us posted. Now, moving on, the government continues to point out its flexibility over the medical school quota hike. The medical community, including trainee doctors and medical school students, says it'll speak with a collective voice from now on, starting with a joint press briefing later this week. Our Yoon reports.
The medical community has described last week's meeting with President Yoon as a meaningful encounter. The head of the Korean Medical Association made an official announcement on Sunday, following a 3-hour discussion among medical organizations.
The Emergency Response Committee assesses the meeting between the President and Park Dan, head of the Korean Intern and Resident Association, as meaningful. The Korean Medical Association reiterates its support for the doctors and students, urging for a unified voice.
The announcement also includes plans to hold a joint press conference involving trainee doctors, medical school professors, and students within this week. Earlier on Sunday, Prime Minister Han Duk-soo addressed potential adjustments to the plan to increase medical school admissions by 2,000 places. The Prime Minister stated that the government maintains a flexible stance on all issues and is not just focused on numerical figures. Meanwhile, some universities have decided to resume classes that had been postponed due to medical students' applications for leave of absence and refusal to attend classes. Gyeongbuk National University and Jeonbuk University will resume classes starting from Monday, while Catholic University and Jeonnam National University will resume classes on the 15th. Based on the regulation that requires at least 30 weeks of lectures annually, the universities said they could not delay the academic schedule any farther. Lee Eun-hee, Arirang News.
Over the weekend, President Yoon met with senior monks at the country's largest Buddhist sect and children at a public park. The top office said Yoon on Sunday took part in a Buddhist ceremony and held a banquet with senior monks at Jingwansa Temple in northern Seoul, expressing his gratitude to the temple for promoting the unique culture of Korean Buddhism and for raising awareness of mental health issues. The head of the Choge Order, Jinwoo, told the president and that not only Buddhists but the religious community unanimously backs the government's plan for medical reform for better healthcare delivery and expects matters to be settled well under Yoon's leadership. Over 10 million Koreans, or roughly 17% of the Korean population, identify as Buddhist. Also on Saturday, the president visited Yongsan Children's Garden and met with families visiting the park. Meanwhile, early voting for the 22nd general election of South Korea came to an end on Saturday. According to the National Election Commission, during 2 days of voting, 13.8 million people, or over 31% of all eligible voters in the country, cast their ballots. That is the highest turnout rate for early voting in South Korea's general election history. Early voting ballot boxes are being stored under 24-hour surveillance by the NEC. They will be opened and tallied after voting ends on Wednesday. And rival parties are busy out on the streets greeting and encouraging people to go out and vote ahead of Wednesday's election day. Now, that includes in the key district of Yongsan-gu in central Seoul. Our National Assembly correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports from the site.
I'm here in Yongsan-gu district, located right in the center of Seoul. To the district's south runs the Hangang River, to its north, Namsan Mountain. And this is where a fierce race is taking place right now for a seat in the National Assembly.
Yongsan-gu is the third least populous of 25 districts in Seoul, with a population of roughly 227,000. But sitting across what's called the Hangang Belt, a name for key districts along the capital's main river, and housing the presidential office since the beginning of the Yoon administration in 2022, it's now being dubbed a new political hotspot. For this year's general election, the ruling People Power Party's Kwon Young-se and the main opposition Democratic Party's Kang Tae-ung are running against each other for the second time. 4 years ago, Kwon won by just 890 votes, or 0.7 percentage points. This was the smallest margin between winning and losing candidates in a Seoul district that year. On Friday, the first day of early voting, the rival candidates went out on the streets encouraging people to vote.
투표하셔야 이깁니다. 투표해야 지킵니다. 안녕하세요. 저는 강태홍입니다. 고등학교 국가평화입니다. 강태홍.
Kwon has served 4 terms in the assembly and as Minister of Unification. He wishes to reform the area's transportation and advance a long-stalled development project to build an international business hub. Kang has worked as a civil servant, mostly in Seoul, for around 3 decades. He has served as the Vice Mayor 1 for administrative affairs of this whole metropolitan government. He hopes to relocate the presidential office and transform Yongsan Park into a full-scale ecological park. As talks on pending issues such as medical reform continue, eyes are on what the final decisions of the public will say come April 10th. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
The U.S. and Japan are seeking tighter bilateral ties, namely in terms of military cooperation, with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida making a state visit to Washington this week. Then what would that mean for the Korean Peninsula? For more, we're joined by Professor Im Min-jung this morning. Welcome.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Why is Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida making a state visit to the U.S. now? I mean, does the timing have any significance?
Well, the specific visit was already, I think, organized as a schedule. If we recall our memory, in last year's November in San Francisco, there was a APEC meeting. And back then, again, the President Joe Biden, he invited Prime Minister Kishida to the United States. They originally said, like, it can be early 2024. So, again, it was more like a kind of, scheduled and planned meeting. I think, if we again recall our another memory, President Yoon's state visit was, lasted almost like 1 year ago, or last April. It has been almost like 9 years since the Japanese Prime Minister state's visit. Back then, again, Prime Minister Abe was the one, and the counterpart was the President Obama. President Yoon's state visit, there was a kind of 12 years gap between the last one and the President Yoon's one. So again, I don't see very specific meaning from the timing. I will say it was more like a kind of planned meeting.
So it comes as no surprise. Now, a deepening of security and defense ties and an expansion of arms co-development are believed to top the agenda for Kishida's visit. Why is Japan seeking tighter military ties with Washington?
Well, obviously, the international order has been shaken by many challenges. Of course, North Korea, its ambitious nuclear and missile plan program, it has been consistently threatening not only just South Korea, Japan as well. But beyond that, the Russia's invasion to the Ukraine, now the war in Ukraine entered into its third year, as it has been dragged and dragged. But more important meaning of this specific war is, again, the Russia, who is one of the P5 member, again, the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council. They again cross the line, which does mean many things, again, in international the global governance regime. So obviously, again, Japan has been pretty much like threatened or challenged by this kind of, again, the behavior of superpower like Russia, who is trying to change the status quo with the violence, again, with the military force.
Right, lots of global uncertainties, namely geological risks over in Ukraine and also over in Gaza. Then, Professor Im, I have to ask you, what would stronger military ties between Washington and Tokyo mean for us, Seoul?
Well, South Korea, we have been looking for, and we have been aiming for, pursuing really permanent peace in this region, again, on the Korean Peninsula. Without peace of the peninsula, we can't imagine the perpetual peace in this region, again, in Northeast Asia or even Asia overall. So definitely we have been seeking for a peace, but the thing is, again, the North Korea these days, again, today, and Russia, they really strengthen their, not only just, military ties or politically too. Russia is backing up North, and the North is backing up Russia. So this kind of, again, very much a collaborative behavior between the two, who are obviously, again, threatening the existing order. This is a huge challenge. And the North Korea's provocation has become much more complex than before. Again, for example, cybersecurity, or their ambition to develop the satellite, for example. So all those technological development has been, again, the challenging the countries like South Korea who loves peace. So as long as we need to protect ourselves, again, we need to, of course, be more communicative and cooperative with the countries who share the common interest, again, the peace, and the common values like, again, the freedom or democracy.
Right, and you mentioned this earlier. It's pretty much given Biden and Kishida will also be discussing security concerns related to North Korea. What kind of comments can we expect to come out? Any statements regarding North Korean issues?
Obviously, as I mentioned, again, the cyber security is getting more and more increasingly serious, and the cyber security issue is deeply and closely interconnected with the space technology as well. So I guess, again, probably the leaders will be mentioning about this development, or North Korean abductee issue. Again, we do see a huge gap, perception gap between the Pyongyang and Tokyo. Again, Pyongyang, especially Kim Jong-un, like leader, again, she kept saying that, again, that this is a settled problem. So as long as Tokyo wants to keep talking about this, there cannot be a dialogue between the Pyongyang and Tokyo. But Tokyo's position cannot be the same with the Pyongyang. Obviously, abductee issue is super important issue for any Japanese politician, not only politician, for the whole population. So again, we do see the gap. So I guess, again, this related comments can be included too.
And in the meantime, before I let you go, the U.S. is reportedly arranging a trilateral summit with South Korea and Japan again, this time on the sidelines of a NATO summit in D.C. in July. How likely is it that that will actually happen, and what topics will top their summit this time?
I think it can be pretty much likely. Again, the President Yoon of South Korea and Prime Minister Kishida of Japan, they already joined the NATO meeting from last year, last June, for example, in Spain, and then Lithuania. So if they go to the NATO meeting this time again, if so, I mean, it's going to be the consecutive, the third time. Of course, we don't need to aggravate stimulate unnecessarily China because our direct threat is, again, the North Korea. It's more urgent thing. But we definitely want to see a more like a balance. So we don't want to be entrapped in the security dilemma like circle. So in that sense, I do think, I do argue, we need to keep, maintaining our dialogue with the Beijing as well.
Definitely. All right, Professor Im, thank you so much for joining us and your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Japanese Prime Minister Biden-Kishida said that his government is making a high-level approach to North Korea for a summit with the leader, Kim Jong-un. During an interview with CNN on Sunday, Kishida said the purpose of promoting a Tokyo-Pyongyang summit is to address unresolved issues and promote stable relations. Now, the unresolved issues are interpreted to be the abduction of Japanese citizens in the 1970s and 80s and North Korea's nuclear and missile development. Kishida also said his government was monitoring military cooperation between the North and Russia and called joint military drills between Beijing and Moscow concerning with respect to international order and stability. Israel has pulled its ground troops from southern Gaza. The IDF says the war will continue after a break, while Iran warned Israel that its embassies are not safe after the deadly strike on Damascus last week. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The Israeli military has withdrawn its troops from southern Gaza, citing tactical reason. The withdrawal of the troops comes after 4 months of fighting in Khan Yunis and coincides with the new ceasefire talks as Hamas and Israeli delegations travel to Egypt. According to Israel's defense chief Yoav Gallant, troops have withdrawn from the region and are awaiting word of their next mission. Israeli military officials also stressed that the latest move has nothing to do with a U.S. request, who have been calling on Israel to change its approach to the prolonged conflict in Gaza due to the high number of civilian casualties. They also said that the war in Gaza would continue in a different way, while Washington said it appears that Israel is seeking the rest and reorganization of its troops in southern Gaza. While the recent move signals positive momentum for ceasefire talks, tensions continue to flare between Iran and Israel. Speaking at a memorial ceremony in Tehran on Sunday for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard generals who were killed in the apparent Israeli airstrike on an Iranian consulate in Damascus last week, a military advisor to Iran's supreme leader vowed retaliation, warning that no Israeli embassy is safe from Iran. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel was prepared for any response from Iran, while the Israel Defense Forces Chief Herzi Halevi said that the Israeli military knows how to deal with Iran both offensively and defensively. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people continued to gather in Israel over the weekend, demanding the speedy return of the hostages taken by Hamas last October and for Netanyahu's resignation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning. I'm Kim Ji-young, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. The Russian government has declared a federal emergency in the country's southern Orenburg region amid rising water levels in the Ural River. Some of the biggest floods in decades have hit Russian regions in the Ural Mountains and Siberia, as well as parts of Kazakhstan over the past few days. The Orenburg regional government has evacuated more than 4,000 people, including 885 children in the city of Orsk, as the Ural River flooded at least 6,000 homes in the region. Europe's third longest river burst through a dam embankment in Orsk on Friday after meltwater rose the water levels. Local officials said the dam in Orsk was built to hold a water level of 5.5 meters, but the Ural River rose to 9.6 meters. Orenburg's regional governor said that flooding had been recorded along the entire course of the Ural River. Kazakhstan's president said on Saturday that the floods were the country's largest natural disaster in 80 years. A Soyuz space capsule carrying American, Belarusian and Russian crew members successfully touched down in Kazakhstan on Saturday. The three returned to Earth after finishing their mission on the International Space Station. NASA astronaut Laurel O'Hara returned to Earth after 204 days on the ISS, alongside veteran Rosmos cosmonaut Oleg Novitsky and spaceflight participant Marina Vasilevskaya. The Soyuz M-24 capsule took about 3.5 hours to travel from the International Space Station back to Earth. Despite the geopolitical tensions due to the war in Ukraine, space is one of the last remaining areas of cooperation between the US and Russia. Now to the US, where 2 people were killed and 7, including a police officer, were wounded in a shootout at a bar in Doral, Florida. Local police reported that the shootout, which took place early on Saturday local time, followed an argument where one suspect pulled out a gun and killed a security guard who was trying to respond. 6 bystanders were also shot, while 1 police officer was hit in the leg. According to reports, 2 of the injured are in critical condition. Active investigations by the City of Doral Police, the Miami Police, and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement are currently underway. Staying in the US and to Oregon, where one lucky lotto player is set to take home $1.3 billion Powerball prize early Sunday morning local time. After an unexpected delay of 3.5 hours, the winning numbers announced were 22, 27, 44, 52 and 69, with 9 as the Powerball number. The winner overcame odds of 1 in 292 million to claim the jackpot. The all-time biggest Powerball jackpot of $2.04 billion was won in California in November 2022.
Good morning. Major cherry blossom spots in the capital area were packed over the weekend with tourists and residents enjoying the full bloom. The weather was also quite warm, more like t-shirt weather on Sunday, and it will be as warm as Sunday afternoon in most places after a breezy start. Western parts of the country, however, will have high levels of ultrafine dust, while the capital area remains under a dry weather advisory. Humidity in Seoul could go down to as low as 20% by the late afternoon, 30% lower than the ideal level, so please try to stay hydrated. Partly sunny to cloudy in most parts of the country today, with rain in the forecast for Jeju from the afternoon. And Seoul and Daejeon will hike up to 23 degrees, Gwangju topping out at 24 degrees Celsius this afternoon. It will stay dry through this week with more roller coaster temperatures between lows and highs, waking up to single-digit morning temperatures on General Election Day on Wednesday. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Tuesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
영양은 영향력은 없는 것 같아요.
이런 시즌에만 살짝 그러는 것도 있으면 어때요?
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토 스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's April 8th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and you're watching News Generation. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainha.
Happy Monday, everyone.
Happy Monday. And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Good morning. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Turnout for the two-day early voting period ahead of Wednesday's parliamentary elections hit a record 31.28%. More than 13 million out of 44 million eligible voters cast their ballots from Friday to Saturday. It is the first time that the early voting turnout for a general election surpassed 30% since South Korea introduced the early voting system in 2014. And on to esports. Team Gen.G beat Hanwha Life Esports during the League of Legends Champions Korea Spring 2024 playoffs on Saturday. Their 3-1 win secured them a slot to the Mid-Season Invitational 2024, MSI for short, which is the first international tournament of the season. Moving on, 3 out of 10 company workers in Korea say they've experienced bullying at the workplace. According to a survey of some 1,000 workers conducted by a local organization monitoring the lives of company workers in Korea, 30.5% said they've experienced either verbal or even physical abuse. Half of those said they even considered taking their own lives due to the amounts of stress they received. It turned out those who worked for public institutes or as temporary workers or at companies with less than 30 people faced more bullying. And the survey also categorized the types of bullying people suffered from. The most common was defamation and verbal insults. The second most common was inadequate work allocation, namely receiving instructions right before the deadline or before they were just about to leave work. Another problem the survey pointed to was how a majority of those who experienced workplace bullying didn't think of reporting the issue to their superiors. To be exact, 57.7% said they either kept it in or acted as if nothing had happened. Only 6.2% tried getting counseling. Among those who said that they've tried reporting the matter to their superiors, 4 out of 10 said they've been penalized. Now, here in the studio, what do you guys think about this news story and what should be done about workplace bullying?
It's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgusting that we still have to deal with sort of for starters, we shouldn't have to deal with bullying in any situation, whether it be from a young age. Though at a young age, I guess you can have the excuse that you are young, immature, etc. But when you reach the age of being in a company and if you're still bullying someone, absolutely deplorable, disgusting, and you should be ashamed of yourself, to be honest with you. So obviously, we need to have strict rules. We need to have nobody is above the law style rules within the companies, and if that's something that your company hasn't got, that's something that you should really try and make happen by talking to, hopefully you have a human resources department. If they can't help you, then maybe look somewhere higher. But to be honest with you, the fact that this is happening in the workplace, anyone who is a workplace bully, absolutely shame on you, and you're absolutely a disgusting person.
Exactly, I can't agree anymore. And also, I think it's up to the bystanders too. It should be up to the people around them who also see the severity in the situation and help them. Because sometimes I do feel if you are the assailant or the victim there, you can't play a big part because you might not see apart from your situation. But the people around you could at least give them a gesture of help, and that would help them to actually look for options out there, whether that be counseling or reporting to superiors.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on it?
One of the points that I would like to make is in therapy, there is a saying called that people who do come to therapy aren't necessarily the people that need treatment, but the people that cause them to come are the people that usually need treatment. So especially seeing the survey results, only a very small percentage of people were seeking therapy. And even the people that did go through the bullying, they decided not to report because it's a workplace. So one thing that I would like to point out is that for the employers, it is very, very important that you do take care of your employees' mental health, because it does affect the productivity and the outcome. If just going beyond talking about whether it's a good thing or the right thing to do. So that I do hope they have a robust, as Walter mentioned, a human resource system where people actually can take accountability for the actions, because we're adults now, and some of these things that happen should not go unnoticed.
And I think it's up to our generation too. Like traditionally, because Korea is such a conservative, Confucian-based society.
And hierarchical.
Exactly. Because of the hierarchy there, we think that if our superiors say something, it's the law. But I do think our generation now has the flexibility and like the mindset as to thinking that we still need to stand up for our own needs. And hopefully this could be a collective action where we encourage each other to know where to stand our ground for. Now, in the meantime, let's switch gears to our main discussion topic of the day now. South Korea's demographic crisis mainly stems from the dwindling number of babies. So take a listen to my AI voice for more information.
Back in January, the number of newborn babies in Korea fell to yet another record low. A total of just 21,442 babies were born. This was down by 7.7% from a year earlier. It was also the lowest figure recorded for any January since Statistics Korea started compiling related data in 1981.
Despite the government's efforts to boost birth rates, we saw yet another record low in the number of newborn babies in January. So here in the studio, why do you guys think this is the case, and what's preventing a bump in birth rates?
Yeah, so recently the Population Health and Welfare Association conducted a survey to understand the problem with this incredibly low birth rate, and as a result, it ranked cost as the #1 cost consumption when having children. So I can actually speak from my own experience watching my parents raise not just one, but 3 of us. And this was back in the day where there wasn't much government support or awareness. So cost was huge, and both of my parents worked and had a decent job. But I still remember they had to invest a lot of their income in our education. You know, growing up in South Korea, education is one of the key elements to when you're raising your child, including private education, which we will talk about later on. So a lot of investment has to be made in education when you're raising children in Korea.
Especially with the hyper-competitive atmosphere, you don't want to miss out on putting enough money into your child when it comes to education.
Absolutely.
And I do think that's a very important part as to why we're seeing low birth rates. Walter, would you like to add on?
Yeah, so of course it's no secret that cost is the main reason. It's not the only reason, but the main reason. And I know it was something that my wife and I really seriously considered before having a baby was, can we afford to, regardless of though we both work and we both do well for ourselves? In reality, even though you have 2 incomes coming in, sometimes that's just not enough, and it does feel like it's still a big burdensome on a person's, salary. But other than that, people are also just more interested in themselves, and rather than, raising a baby, they'd rather invest the time, the money into themselves. I understand. I mean, even as a parent, I completely understand that that's the direction that some people want to go in, and we shouldn't stop them, to be honest with you.
Exactly, and the high costs of raising a child certainly seem to be a hurdle to boosting birth rates in the country. Then how much exactly does it cost for you to be raising a child here in South Korea these days?
Well, to be honest with you, as I mentioned earlier, we're a double income family, and it takes both of our incomes just to manage having 1 child. Now, for us to have a look at some of the benefits that are coming through to the government is also helping us spend a lot of money, but it's just not enough. It feels like every day I have to pay for something with my child, and which is fine, I'm happy to do so, but at the end of the day, it's just like a never-ending situation when it comes to trying to pay for the child's healthcare. It starts from the very start of when they are born. I mean, before they're even born, you have to pay for their health insurance, you have to pay for child care items, etc. So yeah, it's extremely expensive, to say in a very simple term.
Right, coming from a double income household, it's still very difficult to be raising 1 child. And Cheska, would you like to back it up with some stats?
Absolutely. So for now, let's take a look at the screen for the exact figures. Now, according to Beijing-based Ural population research, it costs us approximately 370 million won, that is roughly about $275,000 to raise a baby, like Walter mentioned, to adulthood. So we're talking about approximately about 18 years old. Now, it is said that the reason why child rearing expenses in Korea are so high is that of education expenses. Now, we talked about it a little bit before, but in fact, there's a statistic that 80% of Koreans receive private education, and more than 1/3 of all child rearing expenses are education expenses, which is a lot.
Exactly. So that takes up a big part of the childcare costs here in Korea. Now, we asked our viewers from around the world if they also hesitated about having kids due to the cost of raising them. If you take a look at the screen, you can find out what 3 of them had to share with us. Starting with Curious in Korea 91, it's really a big factor because prospective parents now demand a higher quality when raising their kids properly and at the same time maintaining a decent work-life balance for themselves. Leon said, regarding raising a child, I have to consider factors like my current financial situation and how I'll be able to manage the expenses of childcare, food, clothing, healthcare, and education. Sunny says raising a child costs a lot more than expected. Nowadays, fundamental childcare products are too expensive to buy everything new, and if we consider education and private tutoring, which is very common, it's difficult to afford them. This makes me consider whether to have children, even though I've dreamed of having a big family. So these are all very realistic reasons as to why a lot of youth out there are hesitant on having a child, and the South Korean government has been trying to increase cash subsidies or financial support policies for those who want to or are raising kids. So Walter, why don't you tell us a bit more about the different policies out there to try supporting youth parents?
Yeah, so I can tell you this firsthand because we've actually had this situation. So if we take a look at the screen in a minute, we'll be able to show you what women who are expecting can expect from the government. So first we'll talk about public transportation. Obviously this is something very important because women still who are working use public transportation from until they're basically about to give birth. So that's about $520 that they'll get in I guess in these fees. Childbirth support, is around $744. Birth benefits is about $1,488. That's basically as soon as you give birth, you are to receive this money. Now, parental benefits are up to $744 per month for 12 months, and child allowance is around $74 for 96 months. So there are some great benefits out there. Is it enough? I don't think so, but it's better than nothing, I guess.
And Jessica, would you like to add on to this question?
Yeah, in the same survey, they also ranked the responsibilities of the national government for the 2040s. Now, when we looked at the survey, the medical service was almost unanimously high with almost 95%, very closely followed by women's work and family balance support, which also ranked in the 90s, which shows how important it is to have these kind of support to raise a child. And also housing support as well as youth job was also in the 89%. Now, I do hope that the government support and subsidies do come to fruition because, as Walter mentioned, these benefits can help some youth families. However, there are still ongoing discussions that the fundamental issues that our generation is not having children has more to do with societal rather than the economic, even though, as we mentioned, economic does play a huge part, and therefore it may not have as much effect as they would have intended.
Exactly. That's why we aren't seeing birth rates necessarily budge, even though we're seeing more cash subsidies out there. Then what else is needed? These seems to be a very integral question that a lot of youth are asking, especially if they're considering having a child. And to find out, we're going to hear from a fellow millennial who used to be on the fence over whether to have a baby in Korea, but eventually decided to have a child here. Stay tuned for our live interview. To find out what stops millennials and Gen Zers from wanting to have a kid here in Korea, we're going to include a familiar face. It's Niall Song. Niall used to be one of the original panelists on News Gen, and last year she brought us great news. She's decided to become a mom here in Korea. Welcome, Niall. Great seeing you again.
So great seeing you.
Hey, everyone. I miss you guys.
I know, we miss you so much. And now you're an expecting mom now, but I remember you didn't want to have kids at first. So what made you hesitate?
Oh, I mean, I'm not the best with children. I do like youth, but I think when it comes to newborn babies, maybe toddlers, I'm not the smoothest of the people out there. I'm not a child whisperer. Like many people are concerned with financial issues. You guys talked about that. Kids do cost a lot. I do think it's a completely different lifestyle once you start having children. Your life basically evolves around the kid, and it should. And so I think I was kind of contemplating on whether I was ready for that change.
And now I really want to hear from you, because as in the studio we're discussing so many reasons that our generation is choosing not to have children, and you're now soon expecting. So was there a turning point that led you to want to have a kid here in Korea?
I think it's not even just about Korea or where. I think it's who you're doing it with and who you're having a child with. I'm gonna be a little mushy for a bit. I have a wonderful husband. He loves children, and he's been so supportive of me through this entire pregnancy and about having children. And he said it's gonna be a great experience, and I understand that it's going to be hard. Maybe he's lying a little bit, but the fact that, you know, I've seen this character, I've seen this character really push through, and I've seen myself grow a lot. I think that helps a lot. I have a lot of friends who have had a positive experience with having children, and they're not considered rich in Korea, as we say, but they have incredible values on how to raise children and how to raise good people, rather than, you know, giving them the fullest experience in life. I feel like oftentimes we get really caught up in trying to do everything that we kind of miss the whole experience. Yeah.
Nael, my sister from another mother, how much I miss you so much. Based on your research, and as you and I have talked many, many times, we know how much you research in your Excel sheets, and you have all these different things up. But what are some notable child nurturing support policies or child policies launched by the government that had interest to you?
I mean, you guys already covered most everything on the little chart that I saw earlier, but yeah, I'm sure there'll be more to come in the future. But for one, to be specific, I haven't paid for any of my hospital bills since I got pregnant. Yeah, that's coming from the government funding for when you first get pregnant. They give you about 100 million Korean won, and so you just kind of use that as a credit. And then, so that's been helpful. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but once it starts being, you know, like 9 months of pregnancy, it can kind of stack up. So that's been helpful. I think even a lot of my birthing process is going to be covered. I'm doing just like a general hospital birth, so it's not anything super out of the ordinary. And this year they started doing the whole parenting allowance of 1 million won per month for the first 12 months. So I think that helps. Like Walter said, it would be nice if there's more, but I do think that it's manageable right now with where we're at with our income to save that money even. And I heard a lot of people are putting that into like a bank account, even for the child, to, you know, kind of use later on in life. So I think, yeah, hopefully there'll be more. But yeah, these are what we have so far.
And it's great to hear that you are benefiting from all the different cash subsidies or birth rate policies that the government has been rolling out. And I remember having so many conversations with you as to really knowing when to be ready to want a child. And as you mentioned very eloquently, I think it's really a matter of having nice conversations with your partner and seeing if both of you are on the same page. And as Cheska mentioned earlier in the discussion, it shouldn't just be about economic subsidies. I do think societally we need to see that type of change to encourage more people to be on the same page as to whether they want to have a child or not. So in that sense, would you like to give words of advice to aspiring youth out there who might want to have a child one day but are still hesitant or on the fence? What type of change do we need to see in society for them to be better encouraged?
I mean, I think a huge part of it is education, like Cheska mentioned. Financial things are as well, but I think education, there needs to be a systematical change when it comes to education. But in terms of society, I do think that we need to stop comparing so much to the next door person and saying, oh, well, she has this, he has this, their kid has this, so we should do it too. And then we have this kind of almost mob mentality of we need to like sometimes buy certain specific brands for our children. And I think that's us using a lot of our resources in a way that's not necessarily valuable to me personally. So I think really focusing on raising children with good value and, you know, just hardworking people, kind people to really fit into the society rather than the whole, you know, climbing the ladder aspect of it. Not that that's not important.
And now you worried so much of whether you'd be a great mom or not, but I think you're definitely getting there. Learned so much from you today and really miss you. We all miss you here on NewsGen, but it was a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, now we're going to end off our discussion by talking about how cash subsidies don't seem to be the sole solution or method to raise birth rates. So in that sense, what else should be done?
Okay, so if I had to answer this and I have to be truthful, I guess I would be the leader of my own religion, to be honest with you. But we are in a terrible situation in South Korea when it comes to birth rate. But I really can't say that it's a good idea to convince people to have kids because if they really don't want them, they really shouldn't have them. This might seem harsh, but I would rather have a low birth rate, be living in a country with a low birth rate, than have a population of people who aren't willing to raise children properly, because that can just lead to worse off problems in the future. And I know that I've seen firsthand what a child who doesn't, you know, isn't loved by their parents can result in. So yes, I think it has to come down to, Niall made a very, very good point, education.
Education, and only when you're really ready.
Yes.
Cheska?
I'm so glad that Walter mentioned the comment, because now I can hop on it a little bit, if I may. I really do believe that I understand the situation about the low fertility rate and the birth rate. However, I think being a parent is one of the most amazing and important job that a human being can have. So I don't think it should be a country mandate for everyone to be a parent, because if they want to, where there is the will, my friends like Niall and Walter do end up having children. And another thing that I would like to add on top of the education, I do understand that financial benefits are extremely important, as I have witnessed my parents going through it. But on top of that, I do hope the government really takes an active role in making sure that the mental health of the parents are secure before the birth and even after, because, you know, Walter and I have talked about it a lot, but it's a lot of mental stress on both the husband and the wife. And there should be a lot of counseling and support for those aspects as well, as he's nodding, for the welfare of the entire family and the country.
Exactly. And on a personal note, after talking with youth parents like Walter and Nell, and a lot of my friends who are trying to really have a child, I think these types of discussions actually encourage me to really think of whether I'm ready or not and what I want, whether it be a child or having a family or going on with my career. So hopefully we'll see more discussions like this come forth. Now, in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Dainha.
Pleasure's always mine, thank you.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.